Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Tracy Show. As you can see, I have a guest this evening. We're going to have a great time. But before I let my guest introduce himself, I have a couple of bills I have to get paid. Please subscribe. I'm at 146 subscribers. I am trying so hard to get to 300 by the end of the year. And I had to go for 1,000. Then I said, might not work out. So I lowered it to 300. I don't want to lower it to 200, but just subscribe. Subscribing costs you nothing. It's free. You can do it. Um, Definitely support me on buymeacoffee.com/TRACYMedia LLC. I use all the funds raised to get better equipment. As you can see, I need. Um, Like us on Facebook. All you have to do is go to Facebook, type in Tracy Media, one word, and then entertainment, the second word, and you'll find us there. You can follow us. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I don't care. I'm just gonna keep calling it Twitter. That's what it is. Instagram and okay, so this one is important. I still have not received responses for my New Year's Eve show. I am doing a New Year's Eve show, and I created a form that I'm asking everyone to fill out so that I'm not sitting here for an hour doing nothing. So it's the top 10 events of 2023. There's the address right there. I'll probably refer to it several times during the interview. But there is the address right there. So without further delay, I am going to allow my guest to introduce himself.
Well, first off, thank you, Mademoiselle Tracy, for having me on your show. I apologize for missing other opportunities, but I'm glad that you still allowed me this one. My name is Reverend Dr. Brett Dillion, presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party for the 2024 election.
And oh, that was short. Okay. So I'll start off with the question that I always start off with presidential candidates. Why president of the United States and why not governor, mayor, senator, congressperson? Why president?
Well, the reason why I'm running for president is for one simple reason, is to give the people back a voice within the government, because for too long the government has had their own self-proclaimed understanding that we the people supposedly work for them when they're supposed to be working for us. And it's the fact that there's too many things going on within our nation that need a lot of change, that doing something locally would not even cause a ripple.
Okay, so that was you're giving quick answers. So I get a expanded, but that's okay. I can make my
I mean, if you want
adjustment.
me to go
Oh
in
no,
depth a little further.
no, but I didn't expect that quick of an answer. So when what factors? Here's a good question. What factors? You said give a voice to the people, but what other factors led you to believe that being president of the United States or running for president of the United States would be the best option to go for?
The reason why I chose to run for president is because there are many communities that are being affected nationwide, that are being, their rights are being dismantled systematically. Um, I've, on my podcast, I've been talking about the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Act. And when Trump came into office, he started to systematically dismantle that, which led to Charlottesville. And then you also have the people on the left who are just ignoring the basic rights that have been given to people. And it's to the point to where our country seems to be slipping back towards, backsliding towards the civil rights era because of all the divisions that they have placed between all the different communities. But it's time that we stop categorizing people and start seeing what the three words of our Constitution start with: we the people. It doesn't have parentheses where it says except for, excluding, or anything else like that. So it's the fact that the system has been broken for way too long, and it's time for a moral compass to finally be back in Washington, and for the people to actually have somebody that represents them and listens to them and actually acts on things that affect them versus, our representatives in Congress who will do anything to, short of selling their soul, just to, get paid to pass laws and pass, different things. And the corruption needs to stop on all levels.
That's a you got me right into my next question. So what was my okay, I was like, what was my next question? It's actually about the Libertarian Party. Now, you've never been on this show, so just so you know, when people say radical left, that's probably the best way I can describe myself politically. I'm definitely a leftist in terms of what I believe. However, I will listen to anyone. But here's my question. When you first question, when is the Libertarian nomination start? When does that start for you all?
Okay, so right now there's different candidates who are running for, many different seats, and political positions from local, state, Congress, even some that are running for presidential. And right now, those of us who are campaigning for the presidential slot, when it comes time next year on Memorial Day weekend, will be the Libertarian National Convention, to where my name will be selected as being on the ballot for the Libertarian Party.
Oh, and we got a check in. Hello, Stanley. Hope to see you tomorrow. Oh, a Libertarian yum. It's because the reason I ask this question is, and I will always ask it, and I ask it with the utmost respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this of the Green Party, the Constitutional Party, the Socialist, any third party, period. I will say this concern. My concern is this: we know pretty much who's going to get the Democratic nomination, unless Joe Biden drops out, which I kind of think he will, but that's a whole different show.
Yeah.
But whoever the Democratic nominee is, and pretty much Trump has the Republican nomination unless he goes to prison and doesn't appeal, which he will.
And then we're stuck with DeSantis as
yes,
which is even worse.
Yeah, and here comes my question though. So they don't need months and months and months to prepare because they have billions of dollars that they have access to. The Libertarian Party, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you all don't take PAC money and that you don't have the same kind of word of mouth that the Democrats and Republicans have. And so my concern has always been, how do you get, if your convention is in May, you have May, June, July, August, September, October, and you can't really count November because that's when the election.
Yes.
In 6 months, what is it that the Libertarian Party is going to be doing to get word about their candidate?
Well, I don't know, and I cannot speak for other candidates, but I plan on holding campaign rallies, from now until I'm officially nominated, for the Libertarian Party spot on the ballot. Because the thing is that there is just too many vanilla, bland candidates who are just telling people what they want to hear instead of telling them the truth. They're not discussing real issues. They're not facing reality, and they're just sidestepping anything that could even hint at a controversial topic. I face it head on because I'm not coming into this with kitty gloves. I'm coming in with haymakers because of the fact that, I plan on going after and supporting legislation, for victims of, like the Catholic Church, Boy Scouts of America, and, other people who have been abused. I'm going to pass legislation that extends and pretty much puts the statutes of limitations the same as murder. Because the thing is that a lot of victims, it takes them years to be able to find their voice. And on top of that, it's the fact that the Catholic Church keeps everything hush hush. Everything is under sealed documents. Back in March, Baltimore actually, victims had a very big victory where they had 150 documents unsealed naming priest. And now that the Archdiocese in Baltimore is facing lawsuits because of the fact that they were the ones that represented the predators, and they're trying to claim bankruptcy now, which is impossible for the simple fact that they're the Archdiocese of Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia, and Southern PA. So, and plus they're backed by the Vatican. So unless the Vatican's going bankrupt, I'm tired of, these organizations and everything else when victims come forward and they seek redemption and they seek to, get their pain and suffering and everything else, they automatically jump to bankruptcy. It's the same thing that Johnson and Johnson did when it came to the talc powder, the baby powder, and the fact that, it had asbestos in it. And so what Johnson and Johnson did was they split the company in two, put all the lawsuits under, one LLC and the regular business under another. I'm tired of big businesses and everything else not only keeping their boot heels on the throats of the 99%, but also finding any way around having to face the music and actually own up to the pain and suffering for which they have caused so many people.
Yep. So I do want to and I usually do this with all the candidates for president that I bring on. I talk about various issues that are going on in the
Okay.
world and pretty much US, and I'll kind of pick two or three here and just give me your thoughts about how you would handle it. And keep in mind this. If you win, one, it would be the greatest
When
up.
I win.
When you win, I have to say it because I interview other candidates, but I'm
I
glad you're
understand.
confident that you can win. So when you win, it would be the greatest political upset of all time because we haven't had a third party candidate in over 130 some odd years, somewhere around there. And second, I don't know any libertarians in Congress right now. There's none in the House, there's none in the Senate. And how would you deal with the current government at odds with you? So I'll just kind of pick out my first issue. And so,
Well, pretty much you said, that really is one of the biggest hurdles I have to overcome is the fact of that I would be seen as opposition and everything else because, I'm not a Democrat or libertarian. But the thing is that there needs to be more bipartisan agreements and talks and conversations, which Congress does not have with each other. Instead, they threat, manipulate, and everything else, which affects our country when it comes to the budget. I'm sick and tired of the fact that when they cannot agree on a budget, they are still getting paid, but yet they put all other federal employees on furlough, which I think it should be the opposite, to where all federal employees are paid and Congress is put on furlough until they make up their minds.
yep. So here comes the issues here. Stanley has a question. He said, "Isn't big business a because that's what I thought. Because I thought libertarians were all about the open market and the competitive market and making things competitive. That's what I thought too. So thank you, Stanley, for that question."
Well, with that, for me personally, and I've told the Libertarian Party this, is the fact that I will not accept a dollar from big pharma or big oil and all that because of the simple fact that I'm tired of there being the 1% bubble, and then inside that 1% bubble is the 1% of 1%. And I'm sick and tired of the fact that they either make it extremely hard for anybody who is not a white heterosexual male to get a business, run, be CEO, president, and everything else, female corporations and owned companies, as well as any ethnic owned companies. They face a lot of scrutiny. Even, the billionaire who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, he faces, a lot of scrutiny because of the fact that they're pulling back on rights and everything else. So, yes, I believe that it should be a fair market instead of making sure that only certain people are able to make it. Like in the marijuana industry that is growing in the United States, it is 96% owned by white men, and the other 4% are women or those of ethnicity. And they make it 10 times harder for them to get into the industry. And it's the same as any other business or any other industry at all. And I'm tired of it because if we're all supposed to be equal, then why are we not practicing what we preach and making it to where a woman or anybody of ethnicity can get the same equal opportunity for business loans and everything else, instead of being just pushed aside or ignored simply because they are not a white heterosexual male?
Understand. So again, I know Stanley, I'll get to your comments here in a second, but I want to get to I forgot one announcement and it just popped in my mind. So Stanley and other people on my mailing list, you should have all received an invitation for a special taping tomorrow. It's not going to be live on StreamYard. It's going to be in my Zoom room, and I believe it's going to start at, I want to say, 8 o'clock. So be on the lookout for that email. Anyway, I want to talk about what would President Dillon's response be to the conflict in Gaza.
Okay, well, I'm glad you actually brought that up. I actually, on my podcast, um, I actually started speaking about the problems that are going over there back in August, and the fact that besides Israel, Jordan is being faced with the king and the royal family being out, where Jordan has, nuclear footballs of ours. And it's the fact that a group called the Fatah, it's Fatha, they preside in Israel, and the prime minister of Israel has tried for majority of this year to get them out. And the reason why Hamas and Hezbollah has been able to target as well as they have is because they've been given information. I actually called the U.S. Embassy because I have a friend of mine who is an American citizen, but he has family that lives in Jordan, and they have a network of people gathering information in order to try to help avoid these conflicts. I called a month and a half prior to the insurgent from the Gaza Strip to the U.S. Embassy in Israel and actually warned them. And everything that I told them is now coming true.
So let me ask this question in this way, because maybe I asked it in the wrong way. Would you, so there's two sides to this argument. You have what I call the duopoly's response is give Israel whatever it is they need in terms of financially supporting them beyond what we normally would in our budget. Then you have the other side that says, no, we need to cut funding, or we need to cut off funding until there's a ceasefire. Which side is it that you're leaning more towards? Maybe that's the question I should have asked.
Okay. Well, considering the fact that Israel has been one of our allies and part of, our allied coalition for decades, yes, I believe that we should support them because, Hamas and Hezbollah are labeled as terror cells. So the fact that, we have this war on terror and terrorists, and they're not just going to stop at Israel. And I would rather try to get them to have a ceasefire to where the least amount of casualties occur, hostages are released, and the fact that there can be some kind of agreement. But the problem is that everybody wants what they want while giving the other side the least amount they have to give. And there's got to be some kind of compromise. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into another Syria. It's, so it's, I don't think it's going to be a conflict that ends anytime soon. But my fear is that because Iran supports Hamas and Hezbollah from the Gaza Strip and has given them weapons, and people don't want to hear it, but there's also those from Saudi Arabia who have financed and gotten weapons, same as Turkey and Iraq. So it's the fact that Israel cannot be left to be an island to defend its own when it's being when it's going to end up being attacked by all sides. I'm sorry, but the Jewish people suffered enough during the Holocaust, and I would rather not see a repeat of that, as well as the fact that there's Christian and there's also Muslims there who are trying to come to a peaceful resolution with this, but even they are not being heard. So it's all three religions that reside in Israel that are under attack, and it's just Gaza does not want to listen.
Here's where I'm going to probably have the most issues because I'm definitely on the other side. So, from the reporting I've been listening to or been following, because I've been following this very closely, they're trying to get Hamas, which I understand. You were bombed by Hamas. So Hamas is are terrorists.
Not to mention the hostages.
Right. Well, I'll just say Hamas is are terrorists.
Yes.
Getting them,
and
I
Hezbollah.
understand.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is when they're attacking hospitals, when they're unplugging electricity that supports NICUs and breathing apparatuses. That's where I don't understand. I don't want to be in a country that can support that. And that's my biggest fear is Israel's just saying, oh, Hamas is there. Well, you're killing, the total's up to like what, 14,000? Hamas hasn't gone anywhere from what I can see.
Yeah. If it's 14,000, on the Gaza Strip side, then, from what my understanding is that, there has been a few thousand deaths, and that even Hamas has targeted, certain places in Israel. They've targeted schools. They've targeted, the closest hospital they get, because they don't have super long range missiles, but they have missiles that have distance enough to do enough damage. So unfortunately, it's like both sides are kind of doing, like a tit for tat kind of thing, as the old saying goes, but the problem with that is that if that continues, then no side's going to win. And no, I don't agree with, completely leaving them without electricity, because there are innocents, in Gaza who, are stuck, because either Hamas won't let them leave, or the fact that when they've tried to leave, they were rejected by Jordan or Israel or Saudi Arabia or Egypt, or so there's that. Yeah, I do have a problem with that. I don't think that. I mean, it would be just as bad as using chemical warfare, to be honest, because when you're putting innocent lives and like children, babies, and things like that, at risk, that's taking it too far. And the Geneva Convention clearly states that even during wartime, you are not supposed to harm the innocents nor those who are non-combative.
Okay, we have a separate question from Stanley, and I didn't ask this. He wants to know, what is the Rev's educational divinity school background?
Okay, so I have my doctorate in divinity, to where I studied all religions, and the fact that, yes, I recognize as Christian, but the thing is that that does not mean that it's the superior religion, because many different religions call God by a different name. And even going back to the Native Americans, they even, before obviously anybody from Europe came over, or anybody else came over, they knew that there was a divinity, a divine spirit in sky, a creator, and they knew that there was a hell. So, and in all religions, even in the Muslim religion, they even acknowledge that there is a hell.
I think he
So,
meant like what
oh,
school? He meant like what school did you earn your divinity degree from?
oh, I did it online,
Okay.
um, because while I was doing all this, I had been in a car accident where my back got fused and had to have a hip replacement, things like that, to where, it was just easier to do it online. But, I promise you that I don't take it lightly, and the thing is that if you cannot respect all religions, then all we're going to do is continuously have the cycle of hatred, of pitting one religion against another and everything else. So
Yep.
that's why I took my doctorate in divinity, was to understand all the religions and to be able to share with people that no matter which religion you look at, they all roads lead back to God.
Okay, so we talked about Israel, Gaza. Um,
Ukraine?
um, I don't. I think I've talked about Ukraine enough. But if you want to talk about Ukraine, you may go ahead.
Well, number one, I believe in supporting Ukraine for the simple fact that their wheat harvest has gone to so many deprived countries, that have food shortages and everything else. And all Russia's trying to do is, because they are very close to pretty much being a bankrupt country, is they're trying to push their goods through and not allow Ukraine to continue to export their wheat, which actually provides a lot of the world with your cereals, with the rice and beans and wheat and flour and things like that go to missionaries, that go to feeding the children programs and other stuff like that. And the fact that Russia wants that income, and that's why they're threatening to sink any Ukrainian ship that carries the wheat out, which a lot of third world countries rely on. I think that that's taking it too far, because you're not just trying to claim a country for no reason. You're also affecting, hundreds of millions of people that rely on this food. So
if I'm hearing you right, and I'll tell you my perception, because I've always thought that the libertarian, well, let me put it like this: most of the libertarian presidential candidates that I've interviewed, which is you'll be the fourth one, all three of them have said no more money to Ukraine. All three well, we didn't have the Gaza situation going on, so that's a moot point. So you're taking what seems to me to be the opposite approach in terms of giving them more money. Am I hearing that correct?
Giving them the ammunition, giving them the things that they need to push, keep pushing the Russians back, because a lot of the Russian fronts are starting to weaken and everything else. But it's the fact that what a lot of people don't understand is how much Ukraine itself provides wheat and barley and things like that, for the entire world, even for American products. And so that's the whole thing, is that, they're a country that we've had a relationship with ever since they split from Russia when it was the USSR, and to where we've had a great import export, business going on with them and everything else. So yeah, I truly believe that, especially, forget about us, because, we're we're a country that can support itself, but it's the fact that Ukraine provides so much to parts of the world that, go without, that do not have. And Russia's not doing that. Russia's only sending theirs out to the highest bidder. So yes, I completely support Ukraine and the fact that helping them get their country back.
So we're going to move to domestic issues. There are several of them, but I won't, of course, go through them all. One of the things that is really of concern to the people who I know watch my channel, all 5 of y'all, thank you. Is the homeless rate. It is steadily going up. It's now estimated that somewhere between 10 to 12% of Americans are homeless. And when we say homeless, we're talking about people that live in their cars, obviously they live on the streets, and are living in like hotels and motels and those type of things.
Or living in, or like tent cities.
Right, tent cities. Or people who live with relatives, like they're couch hopping, essentially. Those people are homeless.
I'm actually glad that you brought this topic up, because the thing is that we, ever since the bubble burst, as far as real estate went, there are so many abandoned buildings, and I'm not talking, small. I'm talking like whole skyrise buildings, to where majority of it's empty, or there's enough room to where there would be able to put in a kitchen. There would, and different floors, one for women, one for men, one for families, and things like that. And that's the kind of restructuring we need to do, because if we're able to provide, especially mental health, because one of the things I want to put in place, it's called the Right of Mind Act, because we failed leaving the states to, mental health facilities, but federally, majority of those who are homeless, it's because of mental health issues. There's a lot of veterans who are suffering PTSD. And yes, there are a lot of those who lost everything, when the bubble burst in 2008. And then, because so many jobs have been, exported out of the country. But to be able to set up institutions to where we could refit empty buildings for the homeless, to where we not only provide them with food and housing, which the states do through, SNAP programs or the food assistance and things like that, but also we, provide educational, to where those who don't have a GED can get their education in order to get a job, and also to have federal mental facilities for those who are in need of treatment and who self-medicate, and majority of them turn to drugs because they can't afford health insurance or can't get health insurance. So there's a lot of things that can happen just by doing that, by refitting buildings, in order to not only allow a safe place for the homeless, but also to where they will have the option to either go to rehab if they're, having addiction or alcohol problems, but to where there will be, no drugs. And instead of just, oh, well, you have it, you're going to jail, da da da. No, they go to rehab, to where we need to stop avoiding these people and start seeing them as people.
Next issue, and Stanley, I promise I'll get back to your comments, but I want to get to the next question because like I said at the beginning, this is going to probably be one of my shorter episodes. I have a meeting to go to, so I'm like, okay, let me make sure I ask this question or this question.
Well, I can come back as well.
Oh, understand, but no, we're fine so
Okay.
far. But I just wanted to make sure Stanley understood why I wasn't getting to his questions, because he has some definitely good ones. The next issue I want to talk about is an issue that I am very passionate about, and that's Medicare for all. I believe that
I'm sorry. You said Medicare for all?
Medicare for all. I
Yes.
believe that the government has essentially, I don't believe in the anthem humanus, sickness. I think the government could do a better job of it. Talk about what you would propose, because this isn't a state's issue. This is a national issue. We have 62 million people that filed bankruptcy because of medical debt.
Yeah, they can't afford medicine because they jacked up the price of, number one, there needs to be a price freeze and a ceiling to certain, medications like insulin, instead of it costing $1,000 or $1,500 a bottle and everything else. But as I mentioned, with the Right of Mind Act, that is for people with disabilities who have illnesses and things like that to where they get the federal support they need, because besides the homeless, you have, veterans who try to go to the VA, which is a joke, because they just want to throw meds at them instead of actually trying to help them. And when it comes to those with prosthetic limbs, it takes forever to fix them. Plus, those with disabilities, from children to adults, with adult uh, citizens who have disabilities, once they age out of either the foster care program or whatever, a lot of them are literally dropped at a bus station, a mall, or somewhere, given $200 and said, "I'll be right back," and they're left there. So with the Right of Mine Act, it will cover those who do not and will not go without their necessary medications. And to where, like I said, whether it's mental illness, whether it's physical disability, whatever it is, you know, that's why it's called the right of mine, because you should be able to not have to wake up and figure out what you're going to give up paying in order to cover something else, and especially when it comes to medication.
Why I appreciate that answer, there's another segment that I would like you to talk about. And that segment is those of us who work. We work 80 hours every 2 weeks.
Mm.
And premiums have gone up every single year. Every single year. Co-pays have gone up every single year. And the cost of insurance, I think my cost in 2024 is going to be like, I want to say $434 a month, in terms of providing insurance. And that's not counting the medicines I have to buy.
Hold on. You said 400 a month?
400 a month, yes. $400 per month, yes. And that's average. I'm actually low. I've heard people who have paid premiums well into $500 and $600. Well, and
Well, just
co-pays go up every
yeah.
year.
Well, yeah.
And what about those? What about the people like us, like me, who are working, but we have this large chunk of our income coming out of our check to support our healthcare needs?
Well, if I'm going to put a cap on costs for medications, you know, it's the fact that there should not be this extreme rise in cost, for personal, medical insurance, because, and no disrespect to Obama, but when he put Obamacare into action, it really disrupted the system to where they still haven't figured out how to balance it. And so those who have paying jobs, they're hiking their rates in order to cover those who are on Medicare, Medicaid, or supplemented or whatever. I don't think that's right. And I'm, like I said, I'm sick and tired of big business forgetting that without the people, they wouldn't exist, and that they need to stop abusing the people and thinking that they can just do whatever they want and nobody's going to do anything about it.
Next issue I want to talk about. Now this one is, it's a combination of global and domestic, and that's U.S. interventions around the world. We know that our so-called border crisis is mostly the fault of the United States in terms of um, the U.S. coming in and basically overthrowing governments that were duly elected by citizens. I could count the
Oh yeah.
atrocities in Syria. I could count anything. How would you, as president, if you could correct something about U.S. interventionism, what would you correct, and how would you go about correcting it?
Okay. Well, the first place that I would start with, honestly, is Iraq, to where, you know, gather, you know, the different groups together and to where sit them down and allow them to form their own government and everything else, as long as it doesn't end up, Saddam 2.0, but to where, you know, the like the Ba'ath Party, isn't just going on killing sprees against, Sunnis and everything else, but to where they come together with a common goal in order to have a free country, to where they run it without, us trying to put somebody in power that ended up being corrupt as you know what. And so we need to stop forcing who we want to run their country. It's the fact that if we don't work with them, then all we're going to do is continue to, you know, get resistance, and to where they're just going to fight until we either give up or something. But I think that we definitely need to get the different groups together in Iraq to form their government, and equally, and to where then we can back off our presence, you know what I mean, and help them stabilize, their army and all of that.
Okay, now here comes my question.
Domestically.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm going to
Oh, okay.
ask, because I want to follow up on what you just said.
Hmm.
You just talked about Iraq, but I was thinking more countries, like my big example is always Venezuela. Um, what the U.S. is actually doing in countries like, all the countries that have formed BRICS.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, oh yeah, like well, one thing that I'm definitely going to put an end to is the corrupt businesses in America that have destroyed thousands or tens of thousands of acres of Amazon rainforest to put in their ranches and farms and everything else, and to where they're paying off government officials and things like that. That's going to come to an end. And also, you know, these businessmen who think that, they can hide money in the Caymans or do this or do that, and the shell companies and all that. That I'm tired of. And when it comes to trying to, like I said, assert ourselves to put somebody that we want in power in a country, just like here in the United States, it should be about the people, somebody that will stand up for them, that will, not be corrupt, that will not sit there and just say what they want to hear, and while at the same time, receiving payments to do something else.
I want to talk about next the border crisis.
Okay, well, number one, I don't think Biden was correct in his decision to stop the building of the wall when it had already been paid for, materials, labor, all of it had already been paid for, and he put a stop to it. Because then we saw not only an influx of, I mean, if my percentages are correct, the last time I checked, since he stopped the building of the wall, there's been over 4 million um, immigrants that have illegally crossed. Crystal meth and fentanyl have skyrocketed to, I believe the last time I checked was 8,000% on, the amount of crystal meth that was coming in before, and fentanyl is not far behind at around 6.5, 7. And that's the problem, is that we know where this stuff is being made, and they know where it's coming across, but it's kind of like what, Reagan did with the Contras, to where America was getting cocaine and giving them weapons. You know what I mean? So it needs to stop, because especially when it comes to getting money, as far as, raising money for your campaign and everything else, the dark money needs to stop, because there's a lot of cartels that pay into, candidates from local to state to federal, in order to keep their business going. And that needs to stop, because it's not just drugs coming in, it's the human trafficking and the boys, girls, men, and women that are being taken out of our country. So,
So if I'm hearing you right, you're for the wall. Am I
yes.
hearing that correctly? Okay, so here comes my follow up question. And it's probably what I personally believe. I don't know how if you build a wall, and this is my opinion, you don't, and obviously you're not agreeing with me because I'm against the wall. Um, how does a wall stop? And here's why I'm asking it, because ideally, if you can build a wall, somebody's gonna figure out a way to get around it. Now,
Yeah.
maybe that's around it or
Oh,
over it or through it or
well, I have, things that I would do in order to, prevent tunnels and things of that nature, but the thing is that I would also make more entry points to where it's not just, trucks and cars and everything else, but to where, people can come and, to where they would have the, a designated spot for becoming citizens and everything else and coming into the country legally, instead of having to be backlogged with the jam packed, I think it's 3 main hubs that we have. And, but I would open at least 2 or 3 more that would just be for people who are trying to gain citizenship legally, instead of them having to risk their lives, pay cartels, you know, to, be their coyotes and everything else, and to give them a chance to stay, instead of running the risk of ICE just grabbing them and throwing them out.
the next to last issue. Well, no, this is probably going to be the last one. Um, is Well, it's kind of a combination one.
Okay.
So if we're listening to the reports of the Biden administration, and probably the Trump administration did this, um, they keep telling us that the economy is improving. The economy is improving. But yet, I don't know one person that is not struggling in terms of paying for housing. The interest rates are at what, 7.25% now. So people can't afford their houses. They can't, even
Oh
if
yeah.
they wanted to look for a house, they can't because the payments are so high. Food prices have gone up, gas prices have gone up.
Hmm.
What would you, if you could do anything, because there's very few things that a president can do, but if you could do something to kind of bring, one, increase employment, and
Oh,
second, how
I
would
got
you
you covered on
then
that one.
lower, how would then you would lower costs? Because I remember, and I was like a child, Richard
Hmm.
Nixon, when the oil companies refused to lower their prices, he put, not indictments, I can't think of the word, but he put pressure on them, and like legal pressure. Like he actually did
He,
things like
he,
executive orders. That's the word I'm looking for. He
yes,
made an executive
and he
order to
slapped
lower
them with,
fines.
an increase in taxes and
Yes.
everything else. But what I would do is, for businesses who want to keep exporting jobs and call centers and everything else to a Pacific island, that, you know, if they do not hold the same amount of equal, you know, opportunity employment here in America, then, you know, they will have to pay a much heftier tax. I think it's time for the rich people to actually start paying real taxes instead of getting nothing but tax breaks, in order to separate themselves and to continue to attempt to eliminate a middle class to where you're either rich or poor. And finally, when it comes to the price of, the inflation that we've had, it's because of the simple fact that, number one, gas prices have shot up because Biden shut down the pipeline, to where America was actually to the point to where we were exporting fuel, and we were actually one of the number one exporters of oil. And since he shut down the pipeline, he destroyed hundreds of thousands of jobs. And so it's a fact. And the same as car companies moving their factories to Mexico in order to have cars built. Well, if they want to do that, then they're going to, you know, they're not going to increase the price of the car, but they are going to be heavily fined for not providing jobs here and everything else. Because that's the problem, is that all these businesses keep outsourcing and outsourcing. Well, how much more can you outsource, to where, there's no jobs left? And that's the problem, is that the outsourcing needs to stop, and the in-house employment needs to be built back up.
Okay, so I'm going to actually answer Stanley's question because I said that the economy wasn't doing as well as the press would have you to believe and the president would have you to believe. Okay, so Stanley, there are several studies, and there was one did by it's either the Washington Post or the New York Times, and I can't believe I don't know which one, but I'll figure that out. That surveyed um, a set of people, and I don't know the number, that said that 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And by my definition, or anybody's definition, the economy can't be doing well if more than half of the population is living paycheck to paycheck. That number should be maybe 10%, maybe 5, if the economy is doing as well as Biden thinks. So if people are still struggling, then my contention is that the economy is not doing as well.
And not only that, the unemployment rate has skyrocketed. I mean, granted, we had the pandemic, but the problem is that once the pandemic hit, instead of, you know, allowing people to return back to work, they, like I said, they've outsourced. And that's what's caused a lot of problems. And they're expecting people to keep relying on ordering online and ordering, to where it's removing people from a position of having a job. So that's what needs to stop. Too.
So here is my second to last question. What, and I always ask every candidate this, no matter what office they're running for, what have you learned about yourself running for this office that you didn't know about yourself before?
That I guess I was just ignorant to the fact to think that the southern states would change, but the fact that there are still sunset states in the South, and the fact that, Alabama still has, things that are segregated, and the fact that Mississippi, which has been the poorest state for 4 decades, is being pillaged, and it's the African American population that's being the most highly affected, because only 4 out of 100 are actually accepted and getting the food or temporary cash benefits they need.
Okay, and I'm not going to put this question up because Stanley wanted to know what states are you eligible in, and I'm still assuming if you run under the Libertarian Party, you're just going to be eligible in every state that the Libertarian Party.
All 50.
Oh yeah, that's right, because the Libertarian Party is in all 50 states. That's
yes,
right.
ma'am.
That is correct.
And I plan on pushing Congress to finally accept Puerto Rico as a state, because Puerto Rico is every bit of America, by rules, regulations, everything else. The only thing that they don't get is federal funding for when anything happens. And the same that is with U.S. Samoa, U.S. Guam, and all the other U.S. territories, is the fact that we need to stop taking advantage of them, and either, because otherwise we're no better than when Great Britain was running India and parts of Africa and everything else. You know what I mean?
Yep. And final question, where can people connect to your campaign?
Okay, so every Sunday night from 9 to 10 Eastern Standard Time on gcdnetwork.com, I have a podcast called Nothing But the Truth. And I also have T-shirts and mugs and things like that, on which there's an attachment to my podcast, for those who want to support the campaign.
So no website?
Not yet. I have somebody in the process of building it. I actually started by myself, no help whatsoever, but people saw what I stood for and everything else. Libertarian Party approached me, and I've been approached, to do things. So things are falling into place, and no later than the end of the year will a website and all that other stuff be up and running.
Okay, so thank you to our guest, Reverend Dr. Brett Allen Dillon. I want to thank Stanley and the other people that were watching but didn't comment.
And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Stanley, for your questions. They were
Um,
very important.
yes, and Um, I definitely want to invite you all to share this video, like this video, comment on this video, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe. Next week, I'll have another guest. I believe, no, next week is the 23rd. So I will not have a guest, but I will be here next week. So join me then. Have a great evening and
Well,
have a great day.
if you don't want to fly solo, I can join you next Thursday.
I have a special show planned for next
Oh, okay.
Thursday. But
Well, whenever you want me back, you let me know,
I
mademoiselle.
will certainly do that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a great evening.
Yep. God bless.